Welcome everyone to our fall MIP Lunch and Learn. This is Luke Lothamer, and we'll be getting started here on our Lunch and Learn presentation. So today we're going to be covering budgeting and MIP, just like my slide there on the screen says. Hopefully you all received the handout slides via email. If not, you can find those handouts in the GoToWebinar admin pane. So if you do not have those, you can find those in the GoToWebinar handout section. If anyone is having connection issues, please call Leah Peters at the number on the screen here. Again, if you can't hear me, I'm hovering my cursor over her number here. If you all are having any connection issues, please contact Leah. We are offering CPE for today's Lunch and Learn. So if you would like to receive CPE credit, please email Leah. And just note in the subject line of the email that it is for CPE credit, and she'll get you on the list. Many of you have probably attended Lunch and Learns or user groups in the past, so you're very familiar with the GoToWebinar. Due to time on today's, we'll be accepting questions via the chat box. So there, if you see on your side, you can enter your questions, and we will periodically be pausing and taking questions. If for some reason we don't get to your question, we will be reviewing those at the end of the session today, and we will reach out with answers to all of the questions that we receive. Here is today's agenda. We're going to go through some housekeeping items to begin with, as well as introductions, and then we'll be going through the various budgeting topics that are listed on the screen. For those of you who have not attended a Lunch and Learn or user group in the past, the MIP team here at DWD were made up of 3 individuals: myself, Adam West-Gertis, and John Haney. We are all CPAs. And if you need to have questions or anything at all, feel free to reach out to any one of us, either email or the phone numbers. They're listed at the bottom of the slide. All right, for those of you not familiar with DWD, we are a division of a CPA firm, Doolin, Ward & DeWalt. Established in 1939. We are located in Fort Wayne, Indiana, the upper northeast corner there, and we have around 65 staff. On the technology side, we do consist of software consultants and network engineers. We are part of the Accounting Today Top 100 VARs, as well as Bob Scott's Top 100 VARs. Software solutions. So in addition to MIP, we also support and implement other products as well. So as you can see on the left-hand side here, we do offer many Sage products. So if you're familiar, if you've worked at other organizations, different accounting solutions, Sage 100, BusinessWorks, Sage 50, which was also known as Peachtree, and then Sage Intacct. Sage Intacct is the new up-and-comer. We've seen a lot of MIP organizations move or show interest in Sage Intacct. The reason being is it's segment driven. So how you have your segments in MIP, Sage Intacct also has the similar, which they call dimensions. So I do want to take a moment here and just give a brief introduction on Sage Intacct. If you're ever curious about, if MIP isn't meeting your needs, or you've expanded to the point where, hey, we need something more robust, it might be beneficial for you to take a look at Sage Intacct. So in the slides here, I've kind of added one. These are the dashboards being shown in Intacct. And I'm going to pull up Intacct and kind of run through just a high-level overview of it. So one thing I'll point out, Sage Intacct, it's browser-based. So any of you who are on MIP Cloud, very similar to that. If you currently have a local installation of MIP, this would be a new concept. You can access Intacct anywhere that you have an internet connection, and it's not through a VPN connection. So a couple more things, if you're a multi-entity organization, maybe you want to have all of your entities in one place. MIP, these would be considered separate databases. So out here you can see all of your entities in one area. A few other things, pointing out the dashboards, great functionality. You can drag and drop different widgets here and there. You can actually click on any of these and drill down further into the detail. As I scroll down, you've got various reports, charts. You can see a cash trend if you're interested in seeing that there. And the drill down functionality, we see that's what clients kind of gravitate to most. So if you click on any part of your graph here, it's going to drill down into and show you your expenditures. And then let's say, for instance, you wanted to see detail on your consulting fees. Shows you your actual entries that make up that total that we just looked at. Let's say you had a question on this particular entry. You could drill into the entry itself. And it gives you at the top here more details, when it was when the invoice date was, when it was paid, what check number. If you had attachments, you could view those as well. So the reason I'm showing you all of this is just to show you what is out there. Currently, MIP does not have this capability, and we do see a lot of MIP clients gravitating towards this solution. So again, if you've thought about looking at other newer solutions, you might consider Sage Intacct. So I'm going to jump back to our slides here. Again, if you have any questions or follow up on that, feel free to reach out to myself, Adam, or John. One final housekeeping slide here. We do also at DWD offer network services. So if you're ever in the market for managed security, data backup services, managed IT services, or Microsoft Office 365, please consider DWD for that as well. We do offer those types of services as well. All right, so now we get to our first topic here. We're going to take a look at how can you get your budget into MIP so you don't have to keep running financial statements in Excel. Many of you who are seasoned veterans of MIP probably are familiar with the budgeting area, but if you're not, some organizations we come across, maybe you have a budget in Excel. So I can't see your faces, but many of you, or some of you, I should say, maybe you have this in Excel today, and maybe you have a lot of tabs at the bottom. So even though I can't see your face, maybe nod your head if you have anything that looks like this. So you could have different departments, locations, divisions, and have a separate budget in Excel for each of these. So as I'm clicking through here, you're putting together each of these budgets separately. Well, the nice thing about MIP's budgeting module, you can easily pull the information from Excel and place it into MIP. So that's what we're going to kind of show you here today. And I'm going to pull up MIP and kind of minimize my slides for the time being. So if you want to follow along or reference the slides, feel free. Make notes if you need to. And I'm going to do a walkthrough here. So out in MIP, there's a couple of different ways you can get to creating a budget worksheet. So on the left side, you can click your accounting pane, drop down into the budgeting module here, which you see off to the right. You can also go up to your activities menu. If you're more familiar with these menus at the top, you then have a budget worksheet option right here as well. Takes you to the same spot, whether you click on it here or click on it here. Once you do that, it's going to bring you up to your worksheet page. And in the drop down here, you're going to see, it's kind of cutting off my screen here, but your various budgets that you've input over the years. So this is going to be your list of budgets that have already been input and or transferred. So I'm going to pull up an existing one here. This is my FY 2023 budget. You can reference, you'll notice at the bottom, once you've transferred a budget, it cannot be transferred again. So let's say, for instance, you wanted to copy last year's budget and just go forward with what was budgeted last year, maybe make some changes here or there. You do have a copy worksheet button at the top left here. So you could say, I want to copy FY23, call this FY24. We're going to use our original version here. We'll get to the version conversation here a little bit later. That's going to then copy it, and you'll have to go out here and select it. Again, it's an exact replica, identical to what you had in FY 2023. So that's the copy feature. I would say typically organizations are maybe not necessarily creating from scratch, but you can copy and paste from Excel. So my spreadsheet that I had pulled up just a little bit ago, you can literally copy from that and paste into here. So if I take this, and let's just say I want to highlight this section, paste, it just pasted over that. Now, obviously, if you're doing this, you want to make sure that you're pasting the right combinations. The only areas that you cannot paste are the blue highlighted cells. So the titles automatically populate based on your segments. And then same with the totals. The totals are going to auto-populate based on what you have off to the left. So if you're copying and pasting, just know, I'll show you how you can create a blank budget. But if you're copying and pasting, just make sure you're pasting the right combinations in the right spot. So I'm going to go ahead and say undo here. We're going to go back. I'm going to remove this. What I just showed was if you're copying a budget and then just making slight adjustments. If you want to start from scratch, you can then just go ahead and in this worksheet name field, you'll go ahead and type in your new worksheet. You can click tab on your keyboard, and then it brings up your budget worksheet wizard. So if you've done this in MIP before, you're probably familiar with these prompts here. What I will explain is your version is important. So typically we would see original. If you have the needs for separate versions, we'll get into that here in a little while. But for now, I'm going to select original. Budget type. If you are budgeting more statistical categories, such as client numbers or other non-financial data, you could select that here. Typically, this is going to be left as budget dollars. Worksheet type, if it's new for this upcoming year, you're going to select new worksheet here. I will show you in a little while what this revisions worksheet does. We're going to click next. Here you define your budget periods. So in this case, let's say this is going to be 2024. You just have to populate the from date, and then it automatically updates the to. You can pick your budget cycle if you budget at a monthly level, quarterly, or annually. Click next. You can have comparative columns. So if to the left of where you're filling in your values, you want to see what last year's budget was or last year's actual activity, you can have comparative columns added to your budget worksheet. You will want to define at what level you are budgeting. So fund, grant, GL. GL is required at the bare minimum. And then from there, you can say what else or what other levels you're going to budget at. This next prompt, you can say, I'm going to budget expense accounts only, revenue accounts only, both, or all available accounts. Don't see that too often, but if for some reason you do budget balance sheet accounts, you can select the all option. I'm going to select revenue and expense. And then out here, the activity basis, this drop down here is going to determine how your budget worksheet is populated. So if you want to populate it yourself, such as you have it in Excel and you're just going to do the copy paste feature, you may just want a blank worksheet, and then you'll do all the work from there. If you select that, that's your last step, and then you can click Finish, Save. If you want to have your budget created based on activity could be last year's budget, could be prior year actuals, and we'll kind of get into that here in a little while as well. So for now, I'm going to show you blank worksheet. We're going to finish, save, and then here it basically creates your worksheet template for you. And then all you have to do is come out here, copy, okay? That error message I ran into. So one thing that MIP doesn't do, it only gives you about 50 rows initially. So if, as you can see, when I scroll all the way to the bottom, there's 50. Depending on how many rows your budget may be, you'll just want to highlight there, click Insert. And let's just say we're going to insert 100 rows. Okay, I'm going to scroll back up to the top. We're going to paste. My example here doesn't have a fund, so I didn't need to actually budget at the fund level. But there's no harm in me not having that. And then let's go back to my spreadsheet. We're going to highlight all of our options there, and then we're going to paste this. Okay, so I have everything here that I want based on my Excel spreadsheet. Now you could come out here and make adjustments if you wanted to at this point. You can also, I'll show you this, you can spread totals. So if you said, you know, we're going to have $5,000 that needs to be spread evenly over those 12 months, you can come out here and say 5,000, enter. And I do need to have this marked as a budget line item, so keep that in mind. That's what this little B off to the left means. And then there it spread it. So it spread the $5,000 over those 12 months. If all of your rows here are a part of your budget, what you want to do is you want to highlight your budget rows, right click, select budget item here. That's going to add that B to column A for all of those rows. That's important, so when you save or transfer your budget, that all of these get included. If for some reason you had a reference row that didn't need to be included in your budget, you could turn that one off. Therefore, row 4, in my case, wouldn't be included. All right, you can refresh your data. So this little icon in the upper left corner, kind of blue circle, will refresh it. That then populates your titles in column E. And then after that, when you're ready, you can validate it to make sure that when you're ready to transfer your budget, it's actually going to go through successfully. So we'll go ahead and do that. Now, off to the far right here, you're going to see in column U, this is your status. So you can see the rows that pass with no errors. You can also see warnings. So in this case, budget amount is, oops. You can see over here, we have some that are negative values. So that's just giving you a warning saying, hey, you have some negative values. So if these may be contra accounts or negative values for a reason, in which case you would leave those as is. It's just a warning, no issue there. So let's go ahead and save here. When you save, it is going to bring you back to this area. However, you have not transferred your budget yet. So it's not even in an unposted state for you to review in financials. To do that, you will need to complete the transfer option at the bottom right corner here, okay? Once you're ready to do that, we'll go ahead and click transfer. It's going to do one final validation to make sure there aren't any errors. You'll want to enter a new session ID, beginning document number, document date. We'll just use today's date for our test. My database has a warning here. We're going to go ahead and say continue with this transfer. Once it validates everything is good, it's going to give you this message saying it has been transferred successfully. All right. Then it's going to take me back here. This bottom row is the latest budget that I worked on. So you can see that it was transferred on 10/17/2023. So if there's no date there, that means it still needs to be transferred if you want to see it in your general ledger. All right. The process isn't quite complete yet. You do still have to post that session once you're ready. If you wanted to review the individual entries, you can go up to enter budget transactions here. And my session is this one right here, my 2024 budget. You're going to see 12 separate documents, one for each month. And then you can pick any month to review. In this case, here's January, and you see the list. You're going to see an increase and decrease column instead of debit credit. So this would be you're increasing your budget by these values. Okay. Again, I'm showing you this just to make you aware of what the system is doing. Many of you may not need to review these as you have already reviewed them prior to transfer. So many of you are probably ready at this point to just come out here and say, all right, we're ready to post. Okay. Once it's final, then it will bring you back to your budgeting module. Nothing will be left out there to be posted. That is already complete. You can run your financials to see what the budget to actual comparisons may be. And that's really all there is to it when you're creating a new budget worksheet. So I will kind of pause here, see if there are any questions before we move on to our next topic.
Luke, I don't see any questions right now. If you have a question, please go ahead and just type it into chat, and then we'll read it out loud for the group.
Very good. All right, we'll continue on. So next up, the next topic is, if your board decides that the budget they've set in stone no longer reflects current circumstances, how do you account for that? So in MIP, you can have as many versions as you want. So we were using the original version. Many of you may only post to the original version and have never used differing versions, but out here within organization, and if you don't have this menu option, it may be because you don't have permissions to it. So you might have to ask your supervisor or manager. But the setup modules option, you can come out the budget, and out here you'll see a budget versions option. So out here you can see any versions that have been created, or at the bare minimum you will at least see original and revised. So these two are the default versions in the MIP databases. Any outside of this have been created by other users. So like in mine here, there's an operating version that was created. If you wanted to have a version titled board approved, or you want to have amended budget, whatever version example you can think up, you can create out here. I've not seen anybody reach a limit of the number of versions, so you can add as many as you want. When you do add that, though, you can say, let's add board approved. Well, you can kind of see it here. I apologize for why we can't see it. Set as primary. So if you have multiple versions, you will have to distinguish one as your primary. So in my case, I have operating. So you'll want to define which one is your primary, if that's your board approved budget or internal budget, maybe you'll have to define that, and what you want it to appear on reports as, so that display name. So really there's not a whole lot to differing versions. What it really boils down to is once you've created the separate version in this drop down here, when you create your budget, making sure you select that correct version ID. So what I mean by that is, if we go back to budgeting, budget worksheet, let's act like we're going to add FY 2024 operating. And the budget worksheet wizard pops up here. The first drop-down menu is your budget version. So this is where you want to make sure that you select the correct version ID. I will mention, just as kind of a note here for you all, revised. This is not exactly where you would enter a revision to your budget. This is just a separate version. So think of these as version A, B, and C. It's really just a separate budget and not really a revision to one of your other versions, if that makes sense. So keep that in mind and just make sure you're selecting the right ID here. And then when you go to the very next prompt, this is where you define if it's a brand new budget worksheet or if you're making a revision to an existing worksheet. Okay. All right, so the versions is how you can accommodate changes to maybe a board approved budget or an internal budget. I'll pause here and see if there are any questions on that topic.
Hi, Luke. We do have a question. Greg is asking, if in your original spreadsheet there are multiple lines with the same account number, will MIP add them or only take the first one?
It will add them.
Okay. Right now, that's our only question.
Okay. All right. So the budget version, this will pop up in other areas related to reporting and whatnot. So keep this in mind. You will see it again here on our Lunch and Learn today. So I will be circling back to that here shortly. Right now, the next topic that's come up is, can I use prior year numbers from MIP to generate a current year budget? Yes, you can. So when you create your budget worksheet, this would be an example where you're not pulling it from an Excel template necessarily. You're having the system create it for you based on last year's budget or prior year actuals. When you get to the budget worksheet wizard here, the window that's popped up on my screen, I'm going to take you through what it looks like to create a budget based on prior year numbers. So you'll select your budget version. We're going to use, let's use operating in my example here. That we are going to base it on budget dollars, and it is going to be a new worksheet. We're going to update this for 2024. We're going to specify that it is going to be monthly. Okay, I'm going to get my error message there, warning. I'm not going to add any comparative columns. Going to do, let's do grant and department. We're going to do revenue and expense accounts. And this is where activity basis, you will have to have this be ACT or accounts with activity. So from here, if you recall, when we made our last one, we selected blank worksheet, and this was the last step in our process. Now, if you select this other option here, we have more prompts to go through. You can apply filters. So for instance, let's say you are a grant related organization and you have to do differing budgets by grant. Maybe you want to filter your budget here to say, okay, I'm going to do all of my housing grant related budgets first. That would be an example where you might filter on just this grant as opposed to having all of your grants listed out. So we're going to take that off in our example here. We're going to click next. And then on this prompt here, this tells it how it's going to calculate your budget. First being actual versus budget. If you do budget, you'll have to specify, okay, which version do you want the software to look at? And then the calculation method. So you have a couple options here, average of history or period matching. So if you wanted to match the trends over the last year, you might select that option. Or if you just want to have the account combinations that previously had activity, you could have a zero budget and then you'll plug in the numbers after that. So I have seen that before where the organization is going to come up with the budget values, but they want to know what account combinations had activity last year. That would be an example of using a zero budget option. For our example purposes, I'm going to select period matching here and we'll click next. We're then going to have to define, okay, what historical date range should the system look at? By default, it's going to do the prior year, so the prior 12 months, starting with January 1, 2023. It'll show you the beginning and ending dates down below that. We'll go ahead and select next. This tells you it's going to create 47 budget entries based on what we defined there. We're going to click finish and save. Okay. And then this is your budget based on last year's actual values. Okay. Now you can make changes to this. You can come out here and say, this first row, we actually need to spread $12,000. And then there it did that automatically. You could come out here and say, well, this month here is going to be $450. One other nice feature that I'll show you in the software, let's say, for instance, this row here increased by 5%. You can highlight all 12 months for that particular row. You could even do however many rows increased by 5% or whatever percentage you define. You'll right click here, come down to modify selected items. You have differing methods here, so you could say these highlighted items increase or decreased by a particular amount. You could say they increased or decreased by a percentage, or you could say based on a fixed increase or decrease, have it spread amongst the highlighted items. You could have each highlighted item set to a specific amount or have them all selected items set to 0. So various options here based on what I was just describing. I'm going to go with the increase by percentage. So we're going to go ahead and say increase by not 500%, 5%. We're going to say budget lines only and OK. And there it is, it flashed really quick, but it increased all of those by 5%. So easy way to incorporate a calculation for specific highlighted items. Okay. Once you've done all of your changes to your budget based on last year's actuals, you'll go through the same process that we did before. You'll transfer it, then post it, and then it'll be out there to be viewed on reports and can be tracked throughout the year. If you need to, you can, I'll kind of go through the icons at the top here a little bit further. If you wanted to go back through the budget worksheet wizard, you could click on this wand icon and it tells you it's going to begin inserting at row 15. If you don't want to make those changes, we'll click cancel there, but that's a way to get back through the budget worksheet wizard. We talked about the copy worksheet previously. The refresh worksheet, so if you make changes, that'll refresh and make sure your titles are correct, your totals are correct, and so forth. The blue check mark with $, that's going to be the validation step. It's going to double check that all of your rows pass with no errors. There may be some warnings if there are negative values or whatnot. I didn't explain before, but the errors that tend to pop up would be if you had an invalid grant code GL account, well, GL account or a department. So that's one way that it's going to fail entirely, is if you have an invalid code. If you wanted to filter on a specific code or combination so that you know that you're populating those values, you could say I'm going to filter on grant 201. Then you're just focused on that grant and the values associated with it. Okay. You need to take off your filter. You can come up here, push it back to the left, click OK. There's your full budget again. So one way to minimize the combinations you're looking to populate, if you are in fact going in and populating them one by one or making one by one changes to it. All right, you've got a few other print options. So if you wanted to print this to the screen to see what the budget looked like, you have that. And then from here, you could always export to Excel, PDF, and review it. If you wanted to export to Excel here, make your changes, and then copy and paste your changes into the worksheet, you could absolutely do that. And then you've got the print preview. That's what it's going to look like if you print it out on copy paper. You also have the print option if you do want to, in fact, print it out on copy paper. Zoom options here, plus for zoom in, minus for zoom out. And then I don't have attachments turned on, but if you had any supporting documents to go with your budgets, you could always attach those here as well. All right, properties, I'll just kind of go through these tabs here as part of the Lunch and Learn too. So with each worksheet, you have properties. This kind of tells you the background. So if you're unsure of what version this budget is, this tells you it right here. In my case, operating. The last status, so you can see when it was last modified and by who. Once I transfer it, you can tell when it was transferred and who in fact transferred it. You can also see what accounts need to be validated on transfer and save. So if you want your revenue and expense accounts to be validated, then you would select that option. It's by default going to be selected based on what we picked in the budget worksheet wizard. And then out here, it's going to give us what the effective date's going to be for each month that we budget for and when it gets transferred to your GL. So that's going to be the properties tab. Your notes tab, this is really just a blank area if you wanted to add individual notes that you could always reference back to, maybe for next year's budget, if there was something you wanted to mention or keep track of for internal purposes, you might use this area here. Okay, so that would be the process of creating a budget from prior year numbers and not based on a blank or spreadsheet version of a budget. I'll pause here and see if there are any questions on that topic.
Hi, Luke. We do have a couple questions.
Okay.
The first one, Dennis is asking, we create our budgets in Microy and import them into MIP. Once in MIP, can we use the worksheet function?
So yeah, that's a good question there. If you are using Microy, Microy is going to be a third-party solution that's fully integrated with MIP. But what Microy does is you create your budget there, and then it sucks the budget into MIP. for visual purposes, MyCory brings the budget into your enter budget transactions, and they're there and ready for posting. So Dennis, to answer your question, it doesn't bring it into the budget worksheet area, just the budget transactions area.
Okay. Then Debbie is asking, can you demonstrate how you would attach a document?
Yeah, let me see here. I may have to, let me see if that's a quick, let's see. Yeah, it looks like my my demo database here doesn't have attachments enabled. Kind of side topic here. If you don't have that paperclip icon available to you, you may be in the same boat as I, where you don't have the ability to attach anything right now. Your administrator, or maybe if you are the administrator, you can come out here to attachments, set up locations, and you should be able to just enable attachments here and save. And then that will allow you to use or start attaching documents. From here, you'll click on the paperclip and you can go out and find your supporting documentation and save it. So that's kind of what that would look like without me actually doing that.
Great, thank you. All right, so Greg is asking, I was pasting into the worksheet and some of the values created a date instead of an amount. Is there a font that is necessary to avoid that problem?
Yeah, great question. So I think as long as in your spreadsheet, as long as your values, let's see what I have here. I think it's just a number. I tend to not use the comma or thousand separator, but it doesn't appear to be an issue when I copied this one over. I would probably just make sure your format is a number format in Excel, and it should be okay.
All right, that's it for questions right now. Oh, wait. Oh. Okay. He was just saying he used the general number format.
Okay. Well, we can always try to troubleshoot that further. It could be an issue on the Excel side. When I bring over the values, I just click paste. So I didn't change any formatting once it's in MIP. But yeah, we can circle back on that question.
All right. That's it for now.
All right. Great questions, everybody. So the next topic is going to be what's the best way to make adjustments to my budget once it has been posted. So many of you have probably come across this and may be aware of how to make these changes to your budget. If you're not, you can follow along here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and click undo here, and we're going to go ahead and start a new budget worksheet. So blank clean slate, we're going to say FY, oops, didn't mean to do that. FY 2024, let's just say Rev 1, Revision 1. Very important part of this, because I've had this question come up with many support cases asking, well, why didn't my revision take effect on the budget? You'll want to use the same budget version that you used when processing the initial budget. So if it was original, if it was operating, if it was board, if it was internal, whatever the original, I say original, but the initial version that was used, you'll want to make sure to select that and not the revised version. again, the revised version is just a separate version of a budget. It's not a revision of an existing budget. So in my case, I'm going to use original. I'm going to click next. And here on this step, this is where you actually define what type of worksheet you're going to be populating. So I'm going to say revisions worksheet here. Click next. We're going to populate the time period. In our case, 2024. We'll click next. Specify what account types we're looking to revise. In my case, I'm going to select revenue and expense accounts. And then the activity basis here, if you recall, there were options when I clicked this. When you're processing a revisions worksheet, this is the only option. So it looks behind the scenes at what was previously created. You can filter, so like if you knew you only wanted to revise grant 201, you could apply a filter here. And I'll do that just to show you an example. We're going to click next. Based on that filter, it's going to generate 21 budget entries. Okay, so we're going to click finish, save there. It brings up those 21 combinations. And I can modify any of these. So one difference that you'll note is now for each month, in my case, I have 3 separate columns. So it's going to show you what was originally budgeted. It's got a column for whatever adjustments may need to be made. And then based on that adjustment, it's going to update the revised original amount. Okay. So what I'll show you here is, let's say this amount was going to increase by $500. We can type in 500. It's going to then automatically update the revised in column K to 3704. So it does the calculation for you. You could also go in here in column K and say, I know this needs to be $5,000. And it's going to automatically update that. You don't have to do the math to say, okay, what's 5,000 less my original amount? It comes out to be $1,795. You just enter what you know it should be, and it does the math for you. So you can do that for any and all changes that you need to make. The reason I like this approach is you could make one change, you could make many changes. It's all here. If you don't change anything else, it's only going to process the changes that you made. It's not going to update everything to something else. It's going to keep everything else the same. So when I click transfer, go ahead and create another budget version, or budget ID, I should say. Document date's fine. I don't care about the date warning. We'll continue on. And then since I only changed one thing, it was really quick. So it tells me that it transferred successfully. And now if I were to go over and look at the entry that was created for that, we'll look at that session. There's only one document. And when I look at that document, there's only one entry. So it doesn't try to retransfer every single line that you budgeted. It only transfers the changes. So you can see that I increased this budget combination by that amount to get to the 5,000 that we saw on that worksheet. All right, so if you ran a report, you're going to see 5,000 as the total now because we're increasing by that amount. Some organizations may choose to do their adjustments a different way than going through that worksheet like I just did. Some may say, well, if it's only one adjustment, let's just go through the budget transactions here. We'll specify the grant and GL that needs to be adjusted, increase it by that amount. That's not a wrong way either. I would say base it on volume. If you know it's just a couple of adjustments you're making, you could go through this approach here as opposed to going through the worksheet. I try to keep it simple and be consistent. I always go through the budget worksheet, even if I'm just making one change. But go based on your organization's preferences. There's no wrong answer there. I would just say higher volume changes, you would definitely want to go through the worksheet. The budget transactions would be smaller or lower volume changes. I'll pause there and see if there were any questions on making adjustments to a budget.
Right now, we don't have any questions.
Okay. All right, so we're coming down to our final topic here, and that is, once I have my budget entered, how do I add the information to my financial statements? So everybody, once you get your budget in there, your board or whoever you're reporting to, they want to see, okay, how is it compared, your actuals to budget? So if I go out here to my reports menu, my financial statements, let's go ahead and pull up just a simple statement of revenues and expenditures. I'm going to run my board report, and we are going to update my starting dates. And if you're updating this for the upcoming year to compare, what I'll point out a couple things here. If you go to your content tab, your budget columns are in the bottom section, typically bottom left corner in your available columns. And you're going to scroll all the way almost to the bottom. Out there, you're going to see all kinds of budget options. So current period budget, year-to-date budget, total budget. There's also another element to that where you'll want to keep in mind what version you want to show. So like I was explaining earlier, if you have a board version, you have an internal version, an operating version, that's all going to be noted to the right here of these rows. So like in this case, this is your operating, revised, operating, original, and then off to the right here, these are what I have actually added. So I'm reporting on my original budget version, and I'm showing it based on current period as well as year to date. So what that means is current period is going to be what's in between these two dates. So let's say I wanted to just show let's say January, the month of January in that column. But then I also want to have year to date and then maybe even total budget as well. So if I want to add in total budget original, and let's go ahead and run this report. So here, again, since this is out into 2024, my actuals aren't going to be in there, but my budget columns here that have values, current period is going to be for January to January 31st. Year-to-date budget originals going to be this amount, and then total budget original is over there on that amount. So you can swap these in and out. Now, one thing I noticed, and if you're paying close attention, you might see that this 456 is higher than my total budget 445. So one thing you might want to pay attention to if you notice some odd things like that happening, because I've had support calls on this topic alone. Looking at the options tab, there's a date range out here. If you don't update this, your total budget is going to be based on these dates, while those other columns are based on these dates. So keep in mind, you'll want to be sure to update the total budget here on the options tab to ensure that it matches. So now when we run this, again, I think my total budget, I have the dates wrong. I think it's still just looking at one over the other, but you'll want to make sure that that is updated. Otherwise, you're going to get some goofy values. And then also make sure your values here, let's just update this to 1231. I know what it is right there, 2024. So now we have that year-to-date budget original matches, same with current period since they're all the same period. And then we have our variances, because I do have some actual values in there for expenditures in 2024 in my demo database. So again, couple of things just to recap the reporting area as we come down to the final couple minutes. You'll want to make sure that you have the right version. So in my case, I'm looking at my original budget. You want to make sure that that's reflecting the right one you want to present on. And then you also want to make sure your dates are updated as well. 1 for the total budget, 2 for what you're trying to present here on the setup tab. All right, so that's how you include your budgets into your financial statements. And I will pause here to see if there are any final questions for today's Lunch and Learn.
So we have one question, but it reverts back to when you were pasting data into worksheets. He's asking, after having copied the data into the worksheet, I receive a note that says, refresh, no posted amounts. Do you know what that means?
It's probably related to, I go back to the worksheet. I mean, when it mentions refresh, I'm not sure if they're clicking this, but it tells me there's no posted amounts, and it could be related to that refresh option. I would probably, if you can elaborate more on that, we can always follow up on that question.
Okay. And that's it right now for questions.
Okay. All right. Well, in the meantime, again, if you have more questions, feel free to punch those in and we'll answer those accordingly. I will bring up the slides again and kind of jump to the final ones for our webinar, our Lunch and Learn webinar here today. So we do have our year-end training scheduled for Tuesday, December 12th from 1 to 4. Again, it's the same structure as it has been in the past. We're going to cover 1099 processing, W-2s, and then ACA as well. So we'll do that each hour from 1 to 4. It is $99 per session. If you do have an MIP support plan, that is included. So you can view the full agenda and register via this link in the slide. Once again, if you do want to receive CPE credit for the Lunch and Learn today, please email Leah and note that it is for CPE credit. Otherwise, we really thank you for joining us today from Adam, John, and myself. If you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to reach out, email or phone. Thank you, everybody.